Hello, everybody. You are listening to another episode of An Anatomy of the Arts. I'm your host, Ethan Neville, and today is a man carrying the torch of rock and roll forward. Is rock virtuoso Ron Gallo. How are
Oh
you?
man, quite the intro. I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm living life. I'm in England. You're in Italy. We know who's winning at this point. I mean, it's literally just grey out. It's like the national colour for England at the moment. Just
What
grey.
percentage of the time is it gray in England?
Well,
Most of the time?
most of the time. It's
Is it
like
most of the time?
because even when it's blue, it's still really shit weather. So
Still gray. Yeah.
it's like I think like a couple months ago it was announced it would have was it over 2 or 3 months would have 50 days of rain. So
Uh,
that's that's it's just Britain. It's just
So
England.
it's beyond seasonal depression. It's just
It's
it's
just
like a perpetual. Yeah, I got it. That's
it's
great.
continuum. It's
That's
just
great.
continuous.
Nice.
Thank you for joining me today, man. It's
No, thank
a
you.
pleasure to have you here. I mean, throughout all your music, I love rock and roll. I love the classic sound of like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And it's weird to have someone that's like in front of me that's so young and is basically sounding like they're just straight from the 70s, straight from performing at Woodstock or something. It's crazy. I first started listening to it, I was like, okay, well, there's no way I'm going to get this guy on my podcast because he's probably 70, 80. He's probably never like, I was like, okay, that's never happened.
Nice. Yeah, no.
Um,
I internally I'm 70 or 80, but
you can hear
not
it.
not yeah, not externally yet.
Well, at
But I
least
can tell by the posters on your wall. I can tell
oh
that
yeah,
it's
I mean, yeah, I
nice.
I passed on the
Classic.
opportunity to watch the Eagles live on their last tour, and I'm kicking myself daily. My dad went instead, and he brought me back a poster, so I've got this little shrine just to remember what I missed out on. I just wake up every day and just regret it continuously. Um, it's yeah, just don't pass up on watching your
It
favorite
probably wasn't even that good.
band. Yeah, didn't even play my favorite songs. I mean,
Exactly. No hits, all B-sides.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hotel California. Nah, I never heard of it.
Hotel California for 3 hours straight. Everyone killed themselves by the end. It's great.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And even with the Eagles, I mean, your sound is heavily guitar, and the guitar is like a clear and standout piece within your work, especially in all your songs from your heavy metal album all the way up to foreground music.
hmm
I mean, when did you start learning? Because I was watching your Audio Tree performance live, and well, I wasn't there. I wasn't like in the cupboard, but I mean, your live Audio Tree performance, and it was just crazy what you were doing with the guitar. I mean, when did that start?
I got my first one. I was probably 12 or 13. The classic tale of getting one for Christmas one year.
Yeah,
I think I was even somewhat indifferent about playing it. It just I acquired it and
just
I didn't know how to hold it at first. I actually laid it on my lap
like a
flat,
slide guitar.
like a slide guitar. And then I took 2 lessons and learned Green Day and Blink-182 songs. I realized I could teach those to myself from guitar tabs online. And that was a long time ago, and I'm just still doing it. I kind of just taught myself everything, which is still so little.
Mm,
A lot about what I've done, at least up until this point, is more focused on trying to just evoke the most fucked up sounds out of the instrument as opposed to having finesse or skill
yeah.
or talent. And also mostly using it as a songwriting tool. So
Mm,
I kind of use my limited knowledge to my advantage by maybe thinking about it in a way that I wouldn't if I knew too much. Maybe I'll change that and learn someday. But yeah, I don't know. That's just been
yeah.
my approach. It's very hard for me to focus on things. So learning music theory and stuff, I just kind of tune
Draining.
out.
It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what did you start with, acoustic or electric? I feel like you always start with one or the other, and it's not like it's like
From
a few years and then you get to the other.
So I got my first one was electric.
Really?
Yes, and then I got an acoustic guitar like probably 5 or 6 years later.
Mm,
Um, I guess just like kind of whatever music I was into at the time. I was like, I need to get an acoustic guitar now. And now it's a little of both, but
I feel
yeah.
like electric guitars are way cooler though. I mean, I started with an acoustic, and
Hmm.
even after I got the acoustic, I didn't know what I was doing, and I still wanted electric. Because you always start with like the Seven Nation Army and the Smoke on the Water, and it just doesn't sound that. It doesn't have the same ring to it when it's at an out of tune acoustic guitar, because you don't know anything about
Yeah.
tuning either. So it's just like draining and just droning on. I mean, what is your favorite? Like, what's your preferred guitar to use?
I have gravitated towards a Fender Jaguar for an electric guitar. And when I play acoustic, I actually traditionally play a nylon string classical guitar.
Yeah,
Um, I like the way they feel, like the way they sound, and I try to look at um, almost as two completely different worlds in the approach. Like when I play solo nylon string, it's very delicate,
mm,
and the songs, almost every song has a completely different version that is much more about you know
yeah,
the gentle versions, and then when I'm playing electric, like I said, it's just like a chaotic noise machine and loud and fast and you know
yeah,
buzz and whatnot. So yeah, I think it just fluctuates. It fluctuates about what you're into at the time, and sometimes it's electric guitar, other times it's nylon, other times it's 12 string. I mean, it's just
mm,
it's an endless path of just following whatever interests you at a time. So
yeah. And when you were learning guitar, I know you said about um, Link and the other bands you were practicing. Were you always because I mean your sound now is very old, it's very classic. It's like it's modern, but it's like a neo take on rock and roll. You know what I mean? Like it incorporates everything
sure.
that you hear within modern music with all the good parts of the rock and roll. I mean, were you always exposed to that? Were your parents like avid music listeners? What was it kind of? When did it start to overtake and you started to realize? You started to look at these old musicians.
Um, so growing up, I mean, it was classic rock, around the house, and also jazz. That's kind of what I remember. And then and top 40 pop radio. And not a very musical household. My real upbringing, from New Jersey, southern New Jersey, and the scene that I grew up in was punk, pop punk, hardcore, power chords. Uh, and so my first band's like that's what it was, playing in VFW halls or like at bowling alleys, and um, just very DIY. The music was relatively simple. And then as I went away to college, I moved to Philly. For some reason, I started on this sort of history of American music path where I kind of started from the very beginning, which was getting into like old folk, Delta blues, and traditional country and jazz. And I kind of just worked my way forward. And I think with heavy meta, that was kind of at the point, like if we're starting at the beginning, say we're starting in like the 20s or the 30s, when I made heavy meta, like the first record properly under my name, I think by then I was probably in like the late 70s New York City.
Yeah,
Talking Heads, Richard Hell, Patti Smith, the Stooges weren't New York City, but like CBGBs, that kind of, I think that's what I was kind of drawn to because I feel like it tied together all the things about music that I'm gravitated towards, like my sort of punk roots when I came up as a kid, and then being really into lyricism and the words and the writing. And I feel like that era and that record was kind of there. And then I don't know. I guess it's interesting hearing people's I guess like the context in which when they listen to it and what they think the influences are, because that's really where I was pulling from. Like I said, like that late 70s New York City scene. But then I hear people say like, there's Rolling Stones things, and I'm like, I never really had that much of a like a meaningful classic rock phase. But I guess it comes across like that to some people.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I really don't know. I don't know.
I mean, when I was listening to heavy metal, I think it might just be the bits that you can't change it, like the voice, your voice is very powerful, and like you can. When I was listening, it did sound a bit like you could tell it was punky, but like British punk. And I don't know if you like, obviously, I don't know if you've heard, but like that heavy, like not, I mean, it's not the Smiths, like not Morrissey, where it's soft and like,
Yeah,
like,
sure.
but like Oasis, where they kind of
Yeah,
enunciate on specific sounds, and I think
sure.
it might just be that. But how old were you when heavy metal was released?
I was, what was I, 28, 7? I was in my
Yeah,
late
right.
20s. So, yeah,
I
I
mean,
can't.
was it difficult because the demographic for rock changed heavily after maybe the 90s, when the rap and the younger audience were kind of taken away from that and were looking at the East and West Coast and looking at Nas, Biggie, Tupac,
Sure,
and
yeah.
they were kind of listening to that kind of thing. But was it difficult for you to navigate and kind of create a following at first, or like I mean, everyone needs like a solid fan base, maybe like even if it's 100 fans at first. Was it hard for you to kind of navigate that and find your find the crowd for your music?
Oddly enough, I feel like it was very natural and relatively easy. And the only thing that I can equate that to when I made that record was, I think, politically and socially in the US at the time, there was a lot of unrest. A lot of people are angry and frustrated with the way that things were.
Yeah,
And I made a record to reflect that. And I tried to make music that was addressing like things that were actually happening, trying to get to the core of how I think a lot of people were feeling, but really weren't talking about. Um, and there was this magical little moment, I would say like 2016, 17. I had moved to Nashville, and there was like a very thriving garage rock and roll scene happening there. And it sort of coincided with, it was happening all over. In Southern California, there was Ty Segall and the OCs, and even in the UK, I mean, there were bands coming out around that time that felt a little bit like a resurgence
mm.
of things where the timing just kind of lined up. And I came down to Nashville with this record, and like I said, there was a scene that was very thriving, but like that town is usually associated with country music. And I kind of went down with the opposite. Like, I want to go down there and do the exact opposite of what's expected. And I think it really resonated with people there. And then I guess in a bigger way all over, because when we toured, there was a lot of people showing up, and it was kind of, I was almost taken aback by it because I
Yeah,
didn't really have any expectation because of what you said. It's not really at the forefront. It was just, I was merely doing what I thought should be happening,
yeah,
and it wasn't what was happening. And I was very surprised to see that it actually did resonate. And it's really crazy because I almost feel like that era, uh, 2016 through 2019, was like the last gasp for me of whatever that was, where
yeah,
garage and rock and roll music was exciting and it was thriving and people were engaged by it. And then it's like pandemic hits, and I feel like I even changed musically during then too, because it just didn't feel honest. People are in their houses, things are a lot more isolated. It's like the concept of what that is about togetherness and frustration and like catharsis and all these things. And you can't really do that from the confines of your house. It doesn't make
yeah,
any sense.
yeah,
It's dependent upon live. And so I just feel like with everything, the pandemic just took the sails out of whatever was happening. I'm very happy to have been able to be a part of that. Um, one of the last festivals we played, I remember it was like Idols was like just kind of getting going. And it's like now they're doing great. They're all over the world, and they're selling out huge shows. But it feels like a last gasp or something
code for a
for
reset for a lot of people, isn't
a
it?
call for reset for a lot of people. Yeah. And so now it's just, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I mean, the demographic is crazy because I think everyone has that moment, like even in their own lives, there's always that moment when you want to feel angry, and I think that's the good thing about music. Is when I was talking to Mike, like 2 episodes ago, he was saying that language that, the music is universal, and every time you listen to music, there's always going to evoke a different emotion. And it's like with your recent release, foreground music. It's the acoustic versions that you released. They were way more like the original versions that you released were emotive, but then it just showed that the same music can be interpreted differently through just the change of a simple instrument and stripping back a version. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say, is that it's weird how a song and people's own lives can really influence how they listen to music, even if that's
Yes,
not how the artist wanted the music to come across. I mean,
for sure.
it is baffling how, like, I can listen to jazz, and I mean, even like Berlioz, who's doing amazing with his like infusing house music with the classic 1950s, 60s New York, LA. I can listen to that and be happy, and then someone next to me will be crying at it. Like
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy that. And when I listen to you, you can hear the anger, like the power in your voice. It's very, you can tell. Like, if I
yeah,
didn't know that it was about you being angry at the state of a situation that was around during that release, you could tell that you were angry, but someone might think that you were reminiscing about something, and it is
sure.
weird that that kind of thing happened. But that year, 2016, was a massive year for you. I mean, it was the release of Hagen. I don't know, was there an initial reception to heavy metal? How long did it take for things to start picking up for you?
So before I had signed with a label and actually put out the record properly, I had put out three of the songs. I put out Young Lady You're Scaring Me, Kill the Medicine Man, and Put the Kids to Bed independently, like in early 2016.
Right.
Just to kind of test the waters, I put out this EP. I was selling a CD of those three songs at shows, released it online, Spotify and stuff, and it didn't really do much.
Yeah.
Um, but then I was really set on saving that record to really find a platform for it. Like I was really patient, and I'm glad that I was, because I moved to Nashville, I found the label, and like I said, the reception to that record was beyond what I think myself or anyone that was a part of it could have expected,
Yeah.
uh, which is amazing and really crazy because, like, for example, the song Young Lady You're Scaring Me, like, the people at the label were trying to talk about singles and stuff like that. That wasn't even an obvious choice for people. The radio person at the label didn't even come to the meetings at first because they're like, yeah, this isn't radio music. And then that song ended up being like all over radio,
Yeah.
which changed a lot of things, especially back then. I mean, I guess it was a little bit more, I think it had a lot more power in like spreading the word and stuff for people. But yeah, I don't know. The reception was crazy. And it was just like every day kind of waking up and like watching more and more unfold. And then it's like, we're touring over the world and we did Bonnaroo and Coachella, and there's people there, and we're going to cities for the first time and there's people there. It was really one of the most exciting periods of life for sure.
Mm.
Um, and it was very interesting for me to be so surprised by it.
Yeah.
Almost resistant. I was like, this isn't how this is supposed to go. I made this songs in my room, angry at the world. And now, it just seems to be really hitting with people. But I'm very grateful. It's a testament to not caring about what's going on, just doing what is most honest at any given moment. That is the only thing that's ever gonna resonate. People can tell. So
And I mean, that year you got invited to perform at Audio Train. If the listeners don't know what Audio Train is, it's just a massive. It's a big presence on YouTube, especially for like loads and loads. It's a huge catalog of live performances, and your favorite artist has probably been on there at some point. I mean, I was surprised when I was doing research for this that you were on there. I didn't know to begin with. I just searched up Ron Gallo just to see if there wasn't anything that I'd need to, focus on. And there's
sure.
Audio Tree there. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, wow, okay. Um, and Peach Pit, Shaky Graves have all been on there.
Mhm.
And I mean, how? how close was it from that record that you got invited to go on Audio Tree?
That was actually before the record came out.
Really?
Yeah. So Heavy Meta came out in 2017, early-ish 2017, and we kind of, like I said, I put out that 3-song EP of the songs from that record, and we did a lot of DIY touring pre-album in 2016, and we actually did the Audio Tree then.
Mm,
Um, so it was like a preliminary to the actual album
yeah,
release session that we did.
test the waters.
Uh, yeah, and then yeah, we didn't go back after it was out, but I feel like it was kind of cool because it was really fresh then. Like the band as it was, we had kind of just started touring together, and so I just felt like, there was still that untainted sort of an energy.
Yeah.
It was still a little bit like uncertain about the songs and stuff, and I feel like that comes off kind of well.
Yeah, I mean, going into that, because Heavy Metal hadn't been released yet, did you feel that pressure? I mean, I feel like even though I'm not an acclaimed musician like you, I mean, when you release a piece of music, I feel like performing it live after you've heard a certain version of it, there's more pressure to kind of recreate that and make it sound as likewise to that as possible. Was there that pressure for you going in to make it seem or make it come across as well as you can, or were you just trying to have fun?
It's always been the opposite for me. I have always been trying to convey live onto record because I feel
Right.
like we've always been better live than on recording. Uh, just me in general. For there's something about the live atmosphere that I feel like is really essential to what I've always done. Honestly, whether it's solo or with the band, there's just something about having people there that I feel like makes whatever, it's some sort of alchemy that's hard to capture when you're, isolated in these rooms and in these studios. So that's really been my struggle, is the
Yeah.
opposite of how to make the records
Really?
like the live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
Yeah.
that's, I mean, it makes sense with like the sound of, I guess, because I feel like with your music as well, the aesthetics of how you perform benefit the songs as well. I mean, like you were saying, it's angry if you come across that way in performance, and you I don't know how to put, like, not act angry, but you being there and showing everyone that that's how you are and that's how you feel about the songs. That's what benefits the songs more. I mean,
Sure.
anyone can perform any song however they like in the studio. They could be laughing while they're singing, but with your songs actually being angry, you're going to be able to prove that in live performance, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. It's and that's why I kind of said that period when we did Audio Tree was nice because, there's something that also happens too after you tour for years and years and you play the songs over and over again, is that they become second nature. They become autopilot. And
Yeah,
it's really difficult sometimes to conjure up the original emotion. Number one, because you are no longer that person per se. You're no longer in that mindset. Maybe you're not an angry person anymore. Or maybe you're just so detached from the performance aspect that you're just saying words. And that's something that I hate. That's something that really has really grated on my soul at the end of the touring of that record, where I just kind of started to feel uh, like a what's the word for it? Like some sort of caricature of myself.
yeah,
And that's why, like 2019, after basically like 2.5 years of touring that record and the second record, I just didn't even believe it anymore. So I was like, June 2019, we're gonna go on a hiatus and I'm gonna like refigure out what I'm about. Granted, 6 months later it was pandemic, and then the break got a lot
yeah,
longer than anyone wanted or expected. But it's difficult, to because the music is so reliant on energy and things coming from an authentic place. But people change, life changes. And so the model of that certain bands follow is so crazy to me. Like, make a record, tour forever, go hard, go. Make a record just like the last record because it worked. And I can never understand that, and that's why I'm always shifting and changing, and not only the music but how I do things, because it always has to stay. Always have to remain a little bit uncomfortable in what I'm doing, because that's when I feel like it's the most exciting for me. And if it has to be for me, otherwise people at the show are gonna be able to tell, oh, just phoning it in. Who wants to see that? No way. So it's a harder path. I can't lie, really. So I'm probably hard for people to keep up with because I'm all over the place. But for me, it's like I have to be engaged. Otherwise, I'm not giving my best. So.
Is that something that you always try and? I mean, obviously, heavy metal was influenced by the political situation in America. Is that something? Even before that, were you writing songs for just for yourself? Were you into that?
Always.
Yeah.
I mean, even that record, I mean, it was always for myself. I mean, it's always in a room. It's just me looking at my life or the world and just talking about whatever comes to mind. Whether or not people will hear that, I usually try not to think about it too much. But yeah, I mean, with every record, I usually start with that question of, what does the world need, and what do I have to say, really?
Yeah.
And if it's nothing, then I probably won't make music. But
fair enough. I mean, with each of your songs from heavy metal from before then, is there always that part of you in that song? Because I know a lot of artists will talk hypothetically, or if they're in a certain situation that they haven't experienced. I mean, is the songs that you put out always have that piece of you in them, or like an experience that you've had, or an emotion that you feel? Is that always a part of you?
Yeah. Sometimes I exaggerate or piece together elements of myself and other people. I would say in recent years, though, I've gotten just a bit more personal and more direct. But heavy metal, there's a mixture of fantasy and factual. Yeah. But always me. I mean, I would really struggle to talk about something I didn't care about or that I wasn't in it.
Yeah.
So.
And the last question on Audio Tree, the whole performance itself, do you watch back? Have you watched back Audio Tree, your performance on there?
God, it's been a while. I think over the last few years, I think I have landed upon it and watched a little bit of it, just because sometimes it's interesting to see where you were at. But it's been a minute.
Do you enjoy doing that? Because when I edit these back, I hate listening to myself. I hate, like I was saying to Ryan, I think it was Thursday. I hate listening back to myself. Do you have that problem? Because I feel like it's way harder for you, because you've got to make this music and you have that hundreds of thousands of fans. I mean, Spotify alone, 440,000 are tuning in monthly to your music. How difficult is that for you? Because it is something that you have to really overcome to become a musician.
Well, two things. Number one, I think it's good that you don't like to listen back to your podcasts, because it's a good sign that you're not like a sociopath, because I have the same exact thing, especially with talking. It's so cringe to go back and listen to yourself talk. Exactly. But it's a good thing, because how weird would it be? I love the sound of my own voice for hours. So that number one, that's a good thing. Good. Number two, when it comes to the music and listening to it back, the way that I know that something is done is when I can listen to it and not cringe. So I usually just try to get things to that point where I can listen to it and I don't want to crawl out of my skin. So
right. Okay. So I'll make that a note. I'll just keep adding to this until I don't have to stop.
Yeah. Well, it's different. It's interesting with a podcast and talking, because you can't you effects on it, and you can't do multiple takes. But for real, it's when you talk, I'll if I can listen to this back, I'll probably hate the way my voice sounds. Why did I say that? How many times did I say and I
Yeah.
probably say it 20,000 times, and I'm not conscious of it. So with talking, it's one thing, but with music though, you can go back and do takes. You can get it to that point where you're like, okay, I don't cringe,
That's it.
and then you put it
Yeah.
out into the world, and that's helpful because that's when you know something's done. I think otherwise you may never know. So
That's the problem though, that with the podcast, the software that I use, it's like it's not AI, but it's got pieces of AI, so it like highlights certain things that you might want to remove or whatever. The last episode that I released, there's no update, and I was like, oh great, yep, cool. But the new update, it highlights every time you used a filler word, so it will highlight every time you used like the weird noises you make. So
yeah.
I'm like, oh shit. Like I just see the squiggly line constantly. And because it's AI, it doesn't separate the words between very well.
I see.
So you can't get rid of it. It's just there to slap it in your face.
Sure.
And it will just have like, oh, you said 12 times over this segment. I can't get rid of it because because the is so close to another word, half the question's gone. So I'm sat there just looking at these and it is painful. So apologies to the listeners that hear the I feel like if I mention it now, maybe they haven't heard the before, because I feel like when you listen in, when you know that that's what you're going to be looking out for the next
Sure.
20 minutes, then yeah, maybe try and
Exactly.
just don't listen to the no, yeah, don't listen. Reverse psychology. Don't listen to the and they will never do it. Anyways, back to the back to the podcast. Heavy Meta 2017. Young Lady, You're Scaring Me. Biggest song in your catalog. It's got. I last time I checked. I mean, when I first reached out to it, because it's been a minute since I reached out, like with the
Yep.
setbacks and everything. It was on like maybe 45. I don't know. It was in its 40s. Now it's in its 52 million. Last time I checked. It's from your oldest project. Do you believe that that should be your most popular song, or would you happily give that crown to one of your other songs?
I would happily give it to other songs, but it is what it is. That's the one that people gravitated towards, audience-wise, but also just supporter-wise. So it is what it is. I mean, you can't choose. At the time, I would have felt good about that, but it's interesting because that song is there. It's a borderline joke. I mean, it's like this exaggerated kind of you know psycho thriller tale about a real life stalker, but like using imagery and stuff, and it's like a song that I wrote in 5 minutes, like probably back in 2015, not thinking anything about it. And then it becomes the thing that it's also just 3 chords. It's really simple. Not thinking about it too much at all. And then it's kind of like the thing that people associate you with. And the reason I'd say I would pass the crown to other songs is because it's one of the least meaningful songs that I have probably made in terms of, what I kind of make music for is not for entertainment purposes usually. And that song is kind of what it is. But at the same time, who am I to say? Yeah. If somebody gets something from that song, energy, has a good time, who am I to say the value? But for me, I guess as the creator, I'm like, there's things that I have said in other songs that I would much rather be defining about what I do than that. But I can't decide, and I'm grateful, and I'm blessed, and thank you. So
I mean, with that album and the purpose behind it, what was the song for you that kind of encapsulated what you were trying to go for the most? Like what song for you was it that you were like, yeah, that's what I've been trying to, push. That is what kind of encapsulates what this album is about.
All the Punks Are Domesticated, the last song on the record, which was the last song. That was the song that finished the record because it's like I needed something to tie this all together, and that was it. And the reason is because to this day, that song is one of the most where I feel like I really captured what was happening collectively and internally in a way that was, I feel like I did it. Like I
Mm,
found a way to say the thing that I wanted to say in the way that I said it for the first time, and even to this day. And that's why, like, that song has live is often the closer. I even have made like an updated 2020 version of it. But I feel like that song is probably like the core of what I do.
yeah.
Which there's not a lot musically to that song. It's words, and that's kind of everything to me, and the music changes around it. But yeah, yeah,
Mm. And I mean, like I said at the start, you're an incredibly. It's weird because the sound that you protrude is crazy, like individual. Like you don't hear like with Spotify the whole go to station thing where you want to listen to a certain song and listen to the songs that might sound like it.
yeah.
When you do it with your songs, there's not a song that kind of sounds similar. And I know everyone has their own kind of take on music, but it is kind of like a credit to you with finding that sound for you. And I mean, being an absolutely gifted guitarist and the sound that you kind of create with the guitar, how difficult is it for you to kind of create another sound? I mean, you've got a huge catalog of songs out now. How hard is it for you to kind of create another song? Because I feel like the amount of times that you've done it constantly, it must become challenging, no?
It does at times, but I just have to give it a little bit of patience, because the one thing that keeps me going and always has and has allowed me to write for my whole life uh is always being kind of a chameleon, being ever changing, always getting really into something obsessively, almost creating from that place, putting it away and moving on and exploring other things. And so, yeah, just always following, chasing myself, and always chasing what is kind of inspiring to me now. And that always being so drastically different has, knock on wood, to this day, continued to give me,
Mm,
an endless pool of ways to write, and keep myself engaged. So when it runs out,
yeah.
maybe it'll be temporary. I don't know. I won't push it. I mean, I think I would always just kind of, like, that's where I'm at right now, is just giving myself time, because I
Mm,
don't think you can't put a timeline on creativity. I don't think you have to live a life, just be a normal person and observe. And when it happens. But you can't just be like, studio, 2 weeks, come up with
yeah.
something. It's going to be terrible. Um, so that's it. It's just time and exploration,
Yeah.
chasing myself.
And I mean, I guess that's the whole thing with the changing and always making music that's true to yourself, I guess. The way that you feel at that point when you make the song, you're going to always be able to replicate that in the music. I mean, I know there's that whole thing about how you see these posts online, it will be like these four chord progressions for the sad songs that you want to create. And I guess when you're feeling that way about a song and it's kind of like true to yourself, like Your Lady, You're Scaring Me, To Kill a Medicine Man, every song on that album, when you feel a certain way, you're going to be able to replicate that in the sound of a guitar, a bass, a drum. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's going to replicate itself. And I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, I love the album. I think it's a great album. I don't want to keep talking about how great it is because I feel like
Thank you.
your ego is just gonna explode at this point.
No, I really, no, not even
Um,
close. If anything, it'll just make me not want to quit music today.
oh, that's good.
It'll give me a little bit of fuel to consider to
Extended
keep
goodbye
going.
day.
But
Let's go.
yeah.
Uh, I mean, talking about To Kill a Medicine Man, I think that's my favorite song on the album.
Nice.
I mean, I was surprised. I mean, I don't look at a song and then look at the views and then or listens and then decide
Sure.
if a song is if that's a song I'm gonna like. I don't like choose a song that has the most listens, but to me it was surprising that that didn't have way higher than it is. I mean, no one can control that. I mean, it's just the way the algorithm works. It's the way that
For sure.
taste works. But the way it's got that perfect balance between all the components of a good song. And like I said earlier, it has that vintage muted guitar sound at the beginning. I love it's like the 50s blues, it's the 60s, it's the dum, 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 like that, the drone, like the real gritty rock. I mean, what for you was the individual creative process for that like? I mean, I don't know if lyrics comes before music for you, but what was it for you to Kill a Medicine Man that drove you to write that song, and how did you go about it?
So I guess the meaning behind the song, I guess to sum it up, it was sort of about um, how's the way to say it, without it sounding too intense. Um, basically, basically, it was around the time where, like, I drank, I partied a little bit in like my college years in my 20s, but at this point in my life, there was a relationship and a person that struggled with substance issues, and that kind of inspired me to be like, I'm gonna give this up too. And I never really had any issues. I mean, I was always very afraid of drugs, even just like taking medication, but like recreational drugs, I was always like the furthest. I've smoked weed a few times in my life, and it made me lose my mind. So I hate it.
Mm.
Um, and I drank like anybody does in their early 20s. But I got to this point in my life where I was like, what about just not doing this? And
Yeah.
so I did, and I guess just removing that from the picture and how much that exposed to me about what I really like, who I really like, what I really like doing. When you don't center that around alcohol, it's like a whole different. You're like, whoa, I'm not even into any of the same stuff that I was. And then you really start on this path of like, well, who am I really? What do I really like? And so that song was kind of, I guess, a call for thinking about things in that way, because it's so normalized pretty much all throughout the world. I mean, but especially alcohol, it's everywhere, it's all the time. Um, and I'm not sure that it's really serving much in terms of, I think it's probably doing more harm than good. Uh, and so that song is like, well, maybe, consider this, uh, the escapism and whatnot that can come from substances, and just take life on as it is. Uh, it's not always easy, but I feel like it's one of the better things for myself that I've done. So that's where the song came from.
Yeah.
That was a very long answer.
No,
Um,
I love long answers. So that was actually a perfect answer. Look at that. I mean,
okay, great.
yeah, that's perfect.
So this is me here. I just taken life straight for
Yeah.
many, many years. I highly suggest. And sonically, I think when I was writing that song, uh, sonically, like big part of the influence in the recording was there's a Ty Segall album called Manipulator that had come out a few years before I made that record. And I think I was listening to the sonics of that record, and I was like, okay, this is the kind of song that I feel like this is how this needs to feel. So yes.
Okay. I mean, I've said it loads actually. I love this album. I think the listeners understand that I love this album, and I think you might understand that I love this album. So that was the first project, but if we skip how many years is it? Seven years from
Mm-hmm.
2017 to 2024. February, Feb, yeah, I said it right. Hopefully,
Did great. You did great.
foreground music, your latest release, and we spoke briefly about how we all had that reset with how we view music and how we listen, because that was one of the only
Sure.
things that was kind of accompanying us during COVID times, and
Sure.
it was one of the things that was there continuously. It didn't kind of stop. It probably became maybe easier for artists to release because they had so much time on their hands. Um, but when I listen, if you were to put heavy metal and foreground music side by side, you could still hear that gritty undertone, of the influences that you were talking about earlier with the timeline, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on. But it does feel more modern. It has that classic, it has that modern embellishments in it. What kind of drove you? Is that an influence that you've been looking to make since 2020? Have you been trying to experiment with that constantly, or was this like a whole new playground for you to explore? Because heavy metal, it kind of probably limited you in the fact that if you're creating songs with certain sounds, the other songs, you can't go from like a jazz song straight up to a rock and roll in the same album. It would be like you're in a lucid dream. But
Sure.
what I'm trying to say is, was it better for you now that you had a whole new catalog of instruments, sounds, effects to use for you? Was that helpful for you? I mean, what was it like?
Yeah, I feel like foreground music, from heavy metal to foreground music was the culmination of everything that happened. Because between the two, there's two, three albums and an EP. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of exploration. There's stylistically, I made stuff over those years that was all over the spectrum, completely different sounds, genres, feelings, palette, whatever. But foreground music was, because I had done all that stuff intentionally, because I think early on I decided, like, I don't ever want to just keep doing the same thing. I actually want to jump all over the place to establish that this is never just going to be something that sounds like one specific thing. And foreground music was like the first time I had the ability to kind of, I think internally I had returned to a similar worldview and mindset of heavy meta, but I did have all these other, like a sonic palette to choose from. And so I felt like I had, there was like a toolbox there, and also a permission to be like, well, I can just blend all this shit together that doesn't necessarily make sense. And start down a path that I think is probably much more sustainable for me in terms of finding something new, by blending all of that stuff together. So yeah.
I mean, all of the songs on there has that whole unique sound apart from the acoustic versions. I mean, it's still that's a given. But I mean, you said earlier where you listen back to a song, you don't cringe at yourself when you're listening, because that's when you know it's done. With this whole new album, it's a lot more layers. I feel like there's a lot more components to it. What was that? Was that difficult for you to kind of stop? Because I guess it's like, it's not a new sound for you to explore, but it's still not. It's still got a composition of modern and classical, but a lot of artists aren't kind of doing that. They're sticking to one or the other. Was it
Sure.
difficult for you to kind of just stop at points, or did you want to just keep adding? Like, how did you deal with that?
That was more came down more to a practical time issue.
Mm.
And I say that because our friend Jerry, dear friend, he's an incredible musician and musical mind and producer. And we were not in the same place, but he was kind of very informally, like, coming in and out of working on this record. And so he would like get really busy. So he would do some stuff and then he would disappear for a while and do other things. And then he would come back into the picture and be like, oh, well, I can add more. So it got to a point where I was like, okay, Jerry, I got to wrap this record up. You've been very involved to this point. Are you gonna finish this thing or not? And then it came down to like, okay, well, that pushed him a little bit, and we got together a couple of times at the end, and then we just kind of called it.
Mm.
So he added a little bit of flourishes from his home studio, just like production stuff. A lot of the cool sounds that you hear was kind of him taking what I had to kind of like move forward on my own and get it to a point where I thought it was done. And then he swooped back in at the end. Is like, okay, well, let me just add a couple more things.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, like the buzzer has gone off. Like it's time to end this thing. So if you're doing it, do it now. If you're
Oh,
not, then
please,
don't.
please stop, Jerry. Please.
Exactly. And what it ended up being was he probably went over like half of the songs, and then half of them he just didn't get to. So they just
Yeah.
stayed the way that they were. And that was it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, like I said about the acoustic versions, I love them, and I think you can. Although the songs originally they do sound the same, like the acoustic versions sound the same to the counterparts. I think it was Yucca Valley Marshalls. That was I liked that song a lot. Big Trucker Energy, I think another one was. When you compare them though, they seem more emotive, and you truly feel like there's a lot. It's like you're with a lot of acoustic versions. It's like you're in the same room as the artists themselves. It feels like they're playing to you. I
Sure.
don't know. Maybe it's just because it's stripped down and it's not like a 7-piece quartet that's in the song. Is that what you wanted to do when you were creating these alternative versions? Like, what was the motivation for that?
That was exactly it. I think it was to try to like strip these back to where they started. Um, and oddly enough, that's kind of the approach that I'm taking in general with whatever new thing I'm working on is, and it's connected to the last thing you asked me about. Um, with production and adding all these parts and complicating the music. I think one thing that touring this record has led me to is at the core, what I do is really centered around voice and guitar. It's songs
Yeah,
and getting back to that very, very simple structure of voice, guitar, song. That is it. There's no hiding. Um, and it, like you said, it can feel like you're in the room. It feels intimate. That's kind of like, that is exactly what the next chapter is looking like so far for me is to really go there. Because even like we talked about earlier with a song like All the Punks Are Domesticated from the first record, Heavy Metal is a drums, bass, and guitar record, but that
yeah,
song is just guitar. There's nothing happening. It's voice, guitar, and words. And so that's what I've learned. Like at the shows over the last couple of years, like those are the moments that I feel like people are reacting to the most. And so I'm using that as guidance.
cool. And you said that going forward, kind of sticking with that influence, talking about that, and I'm going to wrap it up. But what is your plans for the rest of the year and for 2025? Do you have anything that you want to achieve? Like, what are your plans?
So right now, I guess for most of this year, I've just been in writing mode primarily. Like I said, just getting back to the basics of songs. Like if it doesn't work with those three elements, then it's not good enough. And so it's been just a lot of exploration for me, but I have songs. I have been recording them. I've been trying to record them live, just me. I did a couple solo shows in the States before this to kind of try some of it out. So I'm really focusing on that. Uh, how to make a very sparse record, song based, no hiding. And then once that's done, I will probably do more solo shows in the US, maybe UK, Europe, hopefully. And I think there's going to be a new album. Probably there'll be something out by the end of the year, at least some
Mm.
songs. Probably a new record early next year, and then probably do more touring. But I have a feeling like I'm really enjoying the solo thing right now. So I want to take that around. That's where I'm
Well,
at currently.
I look forward to all of that, and I
Nice.
hope to see you in the UK soon. I
I
mean,
hope so too.
let's hope. I mean,
It's
you
been a
might
trip.
have, yeah. I mean, you might have a culture shock when you come here from Italy, and it's probably still going to be grey when you get there. Probably raining. If you're
I'm
lucky,
okay with it. I actually love it there, and it's been so hard to get there.
yeah,
We tried to come play some shows when the band toured Europe last May. We were trying to add some UK dates, and with all of the new restrictions and stuff for traveling bans and all the new visa requirements and stuff, we just couldn't justify it. So
yeah,
we haven't been to the UK since 2019, and I really want to come back. So
Well, let's hope that happens soon.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for your time, Ron.
Oh, thank you.
It's been amazing. Thank you to the
Right.
listeners for tuning in. Honestly, it was an absolute honor to have you on. I enjoyed this so much.
Amazing.
Thank you to everyone listening.